P. Diddy makes a third attempt to be released on bail, and this time it could actually happen. A new U.S. District Court judge has been appointed to the case, and now it's going to be up to him whether Diddy is released. Meanwhile, he's still behind bars in a Brooklyn jail that, according to his attorneys, has deplorable conditions.
The walls of a federal prison are meant to contain the convicted, but for Sean Diddy Combs, they have reportedly become the boundaries of a nightmare. The music mogul, now simply inmate Combs, is said to be completely shaken to the core after a terrifying
54-year-old Sean P. Diddy Combs is entering his fourth week behind bars, being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. It's a far cry from his lavish life and mansions in Miami and Los Angeles, but ironically, it was the evidence collected at those mansions that put Diddy in jail in the first place. Back in March, federal investigators raided Diddy's homes in Florida and California, collecting evidence in the federal case against him. We now have a better idea about what investigators were collecting, including multiple AR-15 rifles with the serial numbers removed, a drum magazine, and illegal drugs. But Diddy doesn't face any charges for possession of those items. Instead, it was the electronic evidence that led to Diddy's charges. On September 16th, he was indicted by a federal grand jury on charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. A main topic discussed in this indictment was freak-offs, described as elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. And the government alleges these freak-offs were not consensual. The indictment lays out a pattern of abuse that Diddy would often follow, drugging or forcing the victims to drink alcohol that was oftentimes laced with something, sexually assaulting these victims, and then forcing them to have sex with a prostitute. Now, the feds say they have evidence of these freak-offs because Diddy often recorded them. Investigators apparently have dozens of freak-off videos and collected more than 100 cell phones, laptops, cloud storage accounts, and storage devices. They allege Diddy used the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating recordings that he made during the freak-offs as collateral to ensure the continued obedience and silence of the victims. So these same recordings that were once used to keep victims quiet are now being used to prosecute Diddy in a sex trafficking scheme that goes back decades. The allegations against Diddy go back a while too, with survivors reporting abuse as far back as 1991. Last November, Cassandra Ventura, Diddy's ex, filed civil suit against him, citing years of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse during their relationship. Cassie mentioned the freak-offs, saying Diddy recorded them and used them to keep her quiet. After that, a dozen more civil suits were filed against Diddy, and they all followed the same pattern, alleging he drugged the victims, assaulted them, and recorded it. These lawsuits paved the way for Diddy's indictment and arrest, and there's actually more on the way. Weeks after Diddy's arrest, Houston-based attorney Tony Busby revealed he's planning to file 120 new civil lawsuits against Diddy with even more shocking allegations. These lawsuits will apparently include allegations of child sex abuse too. In one case, a kid as young as 9 years old. The lawsuits are also expected to reveal at least one high-profile name that was involved in Diddy's scheme and participated in the freak-offs. But for now, Diddy remains the only one charged in the case, and that's what led his legal team offered a pretty sizable bail package too, saying that Diddy would put up $50 million for his release. This would have been co-signed by Diddy, his sister, his mom, his 3 adult sons, and the mothers of 2 of his children. The defense also suggested Diddy would have major restrictions on travel, a GPS monitor, and even limitations on female visitors. This was presented to Judge Andrew L. Carter, who denied Diddy's bid for release. He argued the bail package was insufficient to guarantee the safety of the community or to maintain the integrity of the case. Before that, Magistrate Judge Robin Tarnowski also denied Diddy bail, highlighting his apparent anger issues and history of substance abuse. She also voiced concern about a danger to the community or witness tampering should Diddy be released. But just this week, Judge Arun Subramanian was assigned to Diddy's case. Subramanian was nominated by President
violent encounter inside the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, the facility notoriously nicknamed Hell on Earth. This is not a report about a petty squabble. This is not a story about a verbal altercation. We are talking about a chilling, physical attack reportedly leaving the former billionaire terrified for his life and his legal team racing to secure his safety. The whispers of fear that follow every high-profile inmate have reportedly materialized into a very real, very visceral threat. Sources connected to Combs' inner circle, specifically a longtime friend, have described a chilling scene. Diddy was allegedly confronted in his cell by a fellow inmate wielding a makeshift weapon, a shiv, a blade fashioned out of whatever materials the brutal environment provides. According to this account, Diddy woke up to a knife pressed right against his throat. Let that sink in for a moment. The man who once commanded rooms full of superstars, who flew on private jets, who controlled an empire worth hundreds of millions, suddenly found himself utterly powerless, face to face with
Joe Biden in 2022 and took the bench in 2023. Before that, he was a law clerk for Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Subramanian's no stranger to high-profile cases either. He's also overseeing the Department of Justice antitrust case against Ticketmaster. That's the case where the government alleges Ticketmaster has an unlawful monopoly on the market. That really came to light after the site crashed in 2022 when Taylor Swift fans rushed to get concert tickets. But back to P. Diddy. His team will make a third bid for release, this time to Judge Subramanian. In the meantime, he's still behind bars at MDC Brooklyn, and according to Diddy's legal team, the jail is notoriously dangerous and run down. Diddy's attorney, Mark Agnifilo, argues there are major issues with the jail, citing violence, poor conditions, overcrowding, and even staffing issues. He also cited some startling statistics. 2 inmates have been killed at MDC since June, and at least 4 inmates have died by suicide over the past 3 years. On top of that, 6 staff members have been charged with crimes over the past 5 years. When Diddy was first arrested, he was placed on suicide watch, which, according to the DOJ's National Institute of Corrections, is, quote, supervisory precautions taken for suicidal inmates that require frequent observation. Diddy's since been taken off suicide watch, but is still being housed in a protective care unit. Actually, the same one as Sam Bankman-Fried. Bankman-Fried was convicted of fraud and money laundering last November after the collapse of his cryptocurrency exchange, FTX. They're both in a separate section of MDC. That's a unit for inmates who require special protection. That's people like Diddy or Bankman-Fried who are high-profile inmates, but it also cares for other inmates who need protection as they assist in ongoing investigations in open cases. Now, according to some reports, Diddy has a few privileges that other inmates lack, including access to daily showers and slightly better food. In his nearly month-long stay at MDC, Diddy has had phone conversations with his children and even an in-person visit from his family. To take a deeper dive into Diddy's life behind bars and the likelihood that he'll soon be released, we're sitting down with attorney Randy Kessler. I mean, P. Diddy has been in the spotlight for decades. He's obviously got a pretty big bank account, living in mansions in multiple cities, and that's what he's used to. And all of a sudden, he's in a prison that's being described as deplorable. I mean, just that unto itself, is that a major change?
Of course, the bigger they come, the harder they fall. And I sort of think that's what the prurient interest of the public is. Jail is terrible for anybody, but for someone who's used to having people wait on them hand and foot and never stands in line and always, gets front row and gets the best table and gets to have the exact opposite, what a life-changing moment. I mean, it's just incredible. And, it brings into context our whole system of innocent till proven guilty. Why is he not being given bond? And, we could debate that all day long. Of all people that's unlikely to flee or get away, well, he's got the resources to flee, but he's so recognizable. And isn't he innocent till proven guilty? Well, yeah, but, we have to recognize there are degrees of innocent till proven guilty. When you have this much evidence and so much stuff out there, does that affect the judge's decision whether to grant bond or not? And you can't think as a human being the judge isn't thinking that some people are more likely to be guilty than others. But the system says you're innocent until proven guilty, and it's sort of a shame that he's in jail. And what if he's vindicated? What if he's acquitted? Then how do you ever give him back those few months of incarceration? Just a lot of things going on here.
Let's talk about that bail because it was denied twice. So Diddy has been in jail for almost a month now at this point, 3 to 4 weeks. That's quite a long time and quite a far cry from what he's used to. But that bail denial, both of the judges mentioned that he has some major resources, that he could flee because he has the money, access to private jets, thing like
with lethal intent in the darkness of a jail cell. The terrifying part of the account is that the attack may have been less about an immediate assault and more about intimidation. The source claimed that the aggressor had ample opportunity to inflict harm but chose instead to make a deadly, undeniable point. It was a chilling warning, a message sent from deep within the prison hierarchy, a clear sign that his celebrity status, his fortune, and his power mean absolutely nothing behind those walls. In fact, they make him a target. Diddy is currently serving his 50-month sentence for prostitution-related convictions, a sentence he received after being acquitted of the more serious sex trafficking and racketeering charges. But the charges he was convicted of, and the dark, graphic nature of the allegations that surrounded his trial, are precisely what make him vulnerable to the unwritten, brutal code of the prison population. High-profile inmates, especially those
Things like that. Do you think that's a valid argument that these judges are making, that he could just flee and run away?
I mean, it's a legitimate concern. No judge wants to wake up and read the headlines the next day. Oh, they treated this guy special and they gave him bond, and now he's gone and he fled from justice. So that's what's in the back of most judges' minds. On the other hand, we deal with cases where clients have significant funds sometimes, and sometimes where there's money, you can craft a unique solution. Years ago it was the ankle bracelet and the ankle monitor, that if you had money to afford $250 a month for the process and the technical details, you could do that. And I can't imagine there wasn't some extreme, unique situation where they could pay for private security guards to monitor, to report. It's just interesting to me that with all the money he has and all the resources he has, they couldn't craft some solution that lets him be under some form of house arrest. And again, it sounds like special treatment, but the truth of the matter is, to incarcerate somebody like him is expensive to all of us. We're taxpayers, and he's got to have unique situations. You can't put him in general population where, everyone wants a piece of him and everyone wants to be his friend and everyone. So maybe some solution where his money could help us craft. I mean, he could build his separate jail cell, and we could keep him there. Just interesting to me that they sort of said, nope, you're going to be treated not like everybody else, but a lot like everybody else. Having money doesn't do it. So I wouldn't want to be those judges. There's sort of a no-win situation for the judge. And it sounds like they're erring on the side of caution. We're going to do what we would do for anybody else, which is keep him incarcerated for fear he flees. And then it's on us. This guilty person or this potentially guilty person gets to go on and live their life because the judge let them have bond. It flips from he's the bad person to now the judge made a mistake. That's what judges don't want.
Just to play devil's advocate for a second, if we're going back in the timeline of Diddy, there were federal raids performed on his home back in March. So obviously he knew about it then. He could infer, okay, they're going to investigate something. And speaking with his legal team, he again could infer charges could be coming down the line. So if Diddy was going to run, he had all the time in the world, 6 months between those raids and then when he was indicted, to run. I mean, is that something that his defense could highlight and say, hey, he could have left but didn't?
I think you should practice law because that's an excellent argument. I think it's a 100% correct argument, which is he had the opportunity to flee, except that sometimes people don't think rationally. Some people that are in power often think, I can get away with this, I can get away with this. And then when they finally realize they can't get away with it is when they try to look at other options. So yes, it's a good argument that he had all the time in the world to try to get away. If he knew this was coming, he should have seen it, and he didn't run. That's taking the approach that we're going to trust people. And unfortunately, not everybody trusts people, and he's going to be locked up until they decide on whether he's guilty or innocent or takes a plea. But yes, that's the argument I'd be making if I was his defense lawyer. What are you afraid of? He could have left 100 times, and he didn't. And he will give you any safeguards you want. And he'll pay for the safeguards. Even though he shouldn't have to. He'll pay whatever it takes so that he doesn't have to be in jail because he's innocent right now.
His defense team did bring a interesting bail package, kind of what you're talking about, a GPS monitor so that people could know where he was, a restriction on the people who could come visit him, specifically women. A lot of people were going to co-sign on this, and it was going to be $50 million. And this was denied 2 times.
Those convicted of crimes involving sex often find themselves at the very bottom of the social ladder inside. They are seen as the ultimate mark, and every day is a test of survival. This alleged attack brings into sharp relief the desperate attempts by Diddy's legal team to get him out of the MDC. They had previously argued to the judge that the Brooklyn facility was too dangerous, citing its history of violence, staff corruption, and dire conditions. They had pushed for house arrest in his Miami mansion, or at the very least, a transfer to the lower security federal correctional institution at Fort Dix in New Jersey. Their request for house arrest was denied, but his recent transfer to Fort Dix, which we have confirmed, now appears to be directly tied to the severity of this frightening incident. Think about the move to Fort Dix. It's a low-security facility known for its rehabilitative programs, a vastly different environment from the tough, concrete confines of the MDC detention center where he was awaiting trial. This swift transfer strongly suggests.
But now there may be a win for Diddy, potentially, that a new judge has been assigned to the case. Do you think it's possible now that this new judge reconsiders and takes the defense up on this giant bail package?
Well, Sierra, anything's possible, right? But now this judge has an even harder time, I think, because the past judge locked him up, didn't let him out, and he's still there available for trial. If the new judge lets him out on bond and something goes wrong, and this isn't the analysis that I'm proud to make, right? We shouldn't be saying, well, judges are worried about their own skin and how they look if something bad happens. And maybe this new judge has a broader view and says, you know what? If he's willing to part, and again, I don't think the money's the issue. $50 million is a high bond, but it's not a question of how bad was the crime. The bond issue is, what is the likelihood that this person would avoid trial and skip town and forfeit their bond? Most people would rather go to trial than give up $100,000. But he apparently has the money and the wherewithal to say, if there's a chance I'm going to jail for the rest of my life, they can keep the $50 million. I'm going to some country where they can't extradite me. So the amount of money is really not as telling as the fact that all these other accommodations, they can't find one that secures the judge in his mind or her mind that, okay, he's not going to be able to leave town with those restrictions in place. I'm comfortable. But, at least the lawyers know what's been turned down before, and they're getting another crack at it. You never know.
So we talked about the potential for bail, and we'll see if this new judge actually allows that. But for now, Diddy is behind bars at MDC, this Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. And his team has brought up some concerns about this place. I mean, by all accounts, it's not a great place to be, not that any jail is, but the conditions sound a little bit worse than maybe other jails out there. Do you think if he isn't granted bail, his team could still say, hey, let's transfer him to a new one ahead of the trial?
They're going to try everything. They're going to try to transfer him. They're going to try to get him out. In a normal case where it's a high-profile person or a well-funded person, the prosecution and the judge is a little bit more concerned about a wrongful prosecution, because people that are mad that they're being arrested for a crime they didn't commit can turn around and file for malicious prosecution. It sounds like there's enough evidence there that they can argue with a straight face that we had a basis to go forward, right? There's so many people coming out of the woodwork that no one's going to say that they were malicious about this. They went after him without any evidence, without any basis for it whatsoever. But certainly there are things that can be done, but the truth is every jail is bad, and some jails are worse than others. And the problem, again, is if you move him, why is he getting special treatment? And maybe he's earned special treatment. Maybe what he's done, maybe he's given so much back to his fans and to the world and to charity that maybe there's a way that it plays out in the end. But again, to go into court and say this jail is bad, move him to another jail, is not your first argument. That's sort of everything else failed. Judge, let me at least earn my keep and get something better for my client than this horrible place that he's in. And they are going to be saying it over and over and over. Innocent till proven guilty. You're putting an innocent man not just in jail, but in a place that's not just a holding place. It's a place that's terrible, especially for him or for anybody.
Right now, Diddy is in a protective care unit of this jail because he is a high-profile name. What do you think, though? If he was moved to general population, would he actually be at any sort of risk?
There's no way. They can't move him to general population. And would he be at risk? Sure, he'd be at risk. There's so many people that have nothing to lose, right? They're going to be in jail the rest of their life. They've got nothing to, they want their 15 minutes of fame. They were friends with Diddy, or they hurt Diddy, or they killed Diddy, or they did. I mean, there's so many, people in jail that this would be their moment. You can't put them there. Plus, do you want to be the judge that makes the decision, or the prosecutor that makes the decision, or the law enforcement officer, or the warden that makes the decision to move him out of isolation and into a unit where
that the Bureau of Prisons took the threat to his life with extreme seriousness. They recognized that the security protocols had failed and that the risk to inmate Combs was simply too high to ignore. For a man who has lived a life of ultimate control and luxury, the experience of being violently threatened while completely vulnerable has, by all accounts, broken him down. The reality of his situation, the sheer, daily fear for his safety, is now the dominant reality of his life. We have received chilling details from sources close to the disgraced music legend regarding an incident that occurred while he was being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, a facility notorious for its brutal conditions and violence, often called hell on earth by those who have been inside. It was here, in the cold, dark confines of his cell, that Diddy reportedly woke up to a nightmare made real. The reports allege a fellow inmate snuck into his cell, not to brawl, but to make a terrifying point.
I think that may reflect in the recommendation to the court, but of course we don't know what that is yet. Um, I don't know if I'm his defense lawyer. I'm kind of I don't know if I am pressing the gas on that, trying to make this thing go faster. I mean, it's coming up. It's coming up soon enough anyway. I would want to give them the time and not press them, because you don't want a probation officer or anybody in the federal system to feel like they're being rushed.
Right.
Because I think it's very easy to just go,
Yeah.
okay, screw it, the guy should stay in.
The prosecution made the
those
point
guys just
yesterday.
me.
They said the point, like, we're not ready to give a really sentencing recommendation. We haven't gotten the report. There's people who say, well, maybe he'll get time served, right? He's been locked up. There's other people say, no, the judge is going to throw the book at him, even though the judge said yesterday, even though I'm denying him bail and I'm looking at certain conditions, this is not reflective or a preview of what my sentencing recommendation or what my sentence will be. But, are we looking at double digits? Are we looking, you think, at 1 to 5 years, time served? I know it's so impossible to ask, but it is a very specific charges he was convicted of.
Yeah, we're not looking at double digits.
Okay.
I cannot imagine the court imposing that. And remember, because this law is so old, and we're in an age of Uber. So literally, somebody in New York City, a man or a woman who engages the services of a sex worker who lives in New Jersey, and if they pay for their Uber, that technically is a Mann Act violation. Okay, so it's a morality crime, and that it just does not carry the same weight.
Will the judge say, hey, listen, multiple instances he was doing it, not one Uber, he was doing it multiple times. You have 2 alleged victims here, Cassie, Jane, and violence, right? He used violence as one of the reasons to deny him bail. I wonder if he's going to look at, even though he was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, different characteristics and components of his relationships with Jane and Cassie and say, this is aggravated.
It's a very interesting question. Can the court aggravate nonviolent offenses that he was convicted of, which are the Mann Act violations? Can he aggravate those when he was acquitted of the more serious charges, essentially acquitted of everything that involved violence, threats, all of that sort of thing? So It's a very, very interesting legal question.
Real quick, asset forfeiture. What is that exactly? How would it work with Mann Act convictions?
I just don't see the feds being on very strong ground to seize a bunch of assets. And here's why, Jesse. Most of the federal cases where you have, especially RICO cases, an actual RICO case is an actual corrupt organization that the purpose is, like I had one in Salt Lake City last year. It was a fraud case where it was one of these calling room scam operations. Every dollar that they made in that, they made out of the bank account of some poor innocent victim who got scooped up in their scheme. So every dollar, everything they bought, every car, every house, everything that they owned was a direct result of money that they gleaned from innocent people. Those are the cases, or narcotics. We see this all the time in narcotics cases where but it's the same principle. All the things that they have are a result of narcotics profits, right? So when you look at one of those cases, you're seizing assets. Here we've got mansions all over the place. We've got planes. This is a very, very wealthy man who made that money legitimately in Bad Boy Records, in the music industry and in the film industry. That's how he made his money, and that is not a product. And that's where we come full circle to this square peg and round hole regarding a RICO theory on this. The money, he didn't make any money from the freak-offs.
This inmate was allegedly armed with a makeshift knife, a shiv, which was pressed directly against Sean Combs' throat. A longtime friend of Diddy, Charlucci Finney, confirmed the horrifying account, stating, and I quote, "He woke up with a knife to his throat." Finney went on to explain the crucial detail that makes this incident so much more sinister than a simple assault. It was a calculated act of intimidation. The aggressor reportedly could have killed him right then and there. In Finney's words, if this guy had wanted to harm him, Sean would have been harmed. It would only take a second to cut his throat with a weapon and kill him. The message delivered was clear, chilling, and lethal: you are not safe, and your money cannot protect you here. For a man who has always projected an image of untouchable wealth and power, the sudden, visceral realization of his vulnerability is said to have completely broken his spirit. The fear is palpable. His lawyers previously argued
He didn't make any money from all of the alleged things he did. He didn't make any money from that horrible video that we saw where he's beating Cassie in that hotel. That's not the source of his income. So I think,
agree.
again, I don't think that the feds or even the court, I don't think the court would look kindly on that. And there's an old adage in the law that you and I've talked about before. Bad facts make bad law, right? And if they run around and try to seize a bunch of stuff based on this, they're literally taking assets from a citizen that earned them legally. He may be a villain, he may be a bully, he may be a horrible person, but he made that money legally. He was not charged here with tax fraud, which means he paid taxes on it. He had
Yeah, no,
accountants,
you're
he
right. I
put it all
get you.
together. So I don't see this judge. I think it'd be a very poor move if they try to take a bunch of his stuff. I think that they still have to create a nexus between the Mann Act
I don't see
violations
it.
and
Yeah, I don't see it.
and his property, and I just don't see it.
I don't see it. Okay, well, he might need the money. Why? Because he's got a plethora of civil lawsuits that he's facing now. By the way, in fact, Tenny Garagos had something to say about that yesterday.
Sean Combs has not sexually assaulted anybody. I've been saying this for months. We've said it with each lawsuit that came out, and today that was proven true. The media got it wrong about Sean Combs every single day for nearly 2 years. I ask that for every time you guys see a civil lawsuit, criminal complaints or criminal indictments, you actually take a look and analyze these and see whether or not these are actually going to stand up in a court of law, because today they did not.
So Sean Combs, he is facing dozens of sexual assault lawsuits. In fact, Vulture recently clocked it at 66 women, men, minors, drugging, sexual assault, violence. Matt, first of all, does the criminal case have any effect on the civil suits? And let me just ask you about this. You have at least one of the people who testified in this case who's a plaintiff, right? Dawn Richard, former Danny Kane band member, claims she saw Combs assault Cassie. Combs threatened her allegedly when she tried to intervene. She claims she was sexually harassed. So the idea of the criminal case affecting any of the civil cases, let's start there real quick.
Well, what's very interesting about civil versus criminal cases is when somebody's convicted, of course, in a criminal case, because the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt, it's called collateral estoppel. It means that for a civil case based on the same event or the same actions, you automatically win the civil case. Okay, so in other words, we saw this with Mike Tyson and his rape conviction, right? When he was convicted of rape, because it was beyond a reasonable doubt, and because the civil aspect only requires proof to a preponderance, that woman a million years ago when that case happened, all she had to do is prove damages. So it's already been proven. All right. What happened here, because he was acquitted of all these allegations, now each one of these plaintiffs bears the burden of proof. So this was not only a huge win for him criminally, this was a big win for Sean Combs when it comes to all those pending civil suits, because now those same people, in theory, would have to come in and testify. And remember, Don Richard is a good example. The cross-examination of Don Richard was excellent in my assessment. And I trained young prosecutors for years on how to do cross-examinations. I've taught it in law schools. That cross-examination was biting and it was really good. So now Don Richard, in her case, she's been really, ripped apart, I thought, on cross-examination in this case. So now she's kind of wounded. Her civil suit is, her statements are all
in court filings that Diddy was seen as a trophy by other inmates seeking notoriety, a high-value target that would bring them recognition if they harmed him. This alleged attack is the frightening confirmation of those worst fears. The guards, according to his legal team, actually had to intervene and stop a previous attempt to shank him. It's not one incident, it's a constant, suffocating fear. This immediate and extreme danger is the driving force behind the major change in his incarceration. While Diddy was originally awaiting his trial and sentencing at the Metropolitan Detention Center, a detention center meant for short-term stays, his legal team fought tooth and nail for a transfer, citing the jail's deplorable and violent history. Following these alarming threats and the reported knife attack, the Bureau of Prisons swiftly moved him. Sean Combs is now incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution at Fort Dix in New Jersey. Fort Dix is a low-security federal prison, a world away from the violence and chaos of the MDC. It's a move his legal team requested specifically because it offers a safer environment and access to programs like the Residential Drug Abuse Program. The fact that he was moved so quickly underscores the seriousness of the death threat he reportedly faced. But while the surroundings may be less hostile, the target on his back remains. His name, his past, and the high-profile nature of his prostitution-related convictions make him a vulnerable figure regardless of the facility. The celebrity spotlight that used to be his shield is now a dangerous magnet for trouble inside. We've seen the first photos of Diddy at Fort Dix, looking gray, bearded, and unrecognizable, bundled up on the prison yard. Gone is the flamboyant mogul, replaced by a man struggling to adapt to a life where he has no control. His future, which already includes a long prison stay, is now shadowed by the lingering question of his personal security. Even in a lower security facility, the reputation and the massive profile he carries will follow him. The notoriety that fueled his fame is now the greatest threat to his existence. The violent attack is a physical manifestation of the complete collapse of his world, a brutal reminder that he has transitioned from being untouchable to being utterly exposed. The man who used to sell bad boy for life is now simply fighting for his life, day by day. We will continue to track his situation closely as his attorneys surely ramp up efforts to secure him further from the constant shadow of violence. The silence from his camp on the attack itself speaks volumes about the fear now gripping them all.